Hello, everyone. I'm Gayatri, and I want to welcome all of us back to season 3 of Catalyze Yourself. We now move into episode 3 when speed lacks direction. We started this season in episode 1 by understanding how pressure quietly changes our internal orientation before anything shifts externally. Then in episode 2, we looked a little more closely at what happens when our inner ground becomes less accessible and that collaborative internal space between our thinking, our emotions, and our awareness and our nervous system begins to loosen or shrink under sustained pressure. And today, we move into what follows next. When inner ground weakens, one of the most typical patterns we find ourselves in is where our pace of navigating that pressure speeds up. And most often, this is because movement, and this can be in any parts of our mind and body, can temporarily reduce the discomfort that pressure creates. And we know this. Speed in itself is not the problem. There are absolutely seasons of life that require decisiveness, responsiveness, and in some cases, increased pace. And it is also true that we can have moments where acceleration is aligned with clarity. When we need to watch out for is where increased pace of thinking and taking actions start substituting for direction, for clarity, and for a way of releasing pressure. Throughout our seasons, we have dived into how our nervous system's priority is to shift us to feeling safe and stable. When our self is grounded in presence of mind, we are able to guide our nervous system to choose the expression that is most effective for us in that current moment. And on the other hand, when internal steadiness feels less available and all parts of our mind and nervous system are not in alignment and collaboration, our nervous system expresses what may have been learned as a default at one point of time. Our nervous system does this with simple priority of alleviating the conditions of pressure that is making our self feel unsafe. We may begin to move before we are fully aligned. We may increase pace before we check orientation. We may feel relief in completion without asking whether what we completed was truly the right next step. And this is the quiet tension we are exploring today. The patterns that can show up for us when our pace speeds up as adaptation under pressure. We will look at how these patterns form, why they feel so stabilizing, how it can quietly pull us away from our internal alignment and direction if you're not paying attention. Having said that, what we cannot forget is that each one of us is unique in our life experiences and have trained our nervous systems according to the lives we have led so far. Each one of us carries different conditioning, different histories of what helped us regain control or stability in the past. The way our pace increases may look different. Some of us speed up through doing, keeping busy with action, some through thinking which can lean more towards worry and rumination in an effort to find that hidden solution to ease the pressure. Some of us increase our pace through deciding quickly, compression. That is a way of speed. It's like getting to the end faster. A faster decision could feel like one step closer to reach the end of pressure. Some of us show the pattern of containing what we feel. Faster emotions are bottled up, the more numb we begin to feel towards the pressure. Some of us go about this by reducing our relational depth. The faster we shut down ourselves from the world, the less anyone will know we are going through pressure. And some of us show up with patterns that focus on proving that we can handle more than we can. It is almost a decision to prove that we are stronger than the pressure, no matter what the cost is. No matter what pattern shows up for us, the most important recognition we must connect with is that they're all adaptive responses. Let us slow down and look at each of these patterns one by one. Some of us may recognize this pattern in us where we feel relief when we stay busy. keeping busy with actions, adding tasks, filling space, moving from one responsibility to the next without much pause. To the outside world, this can look productive, efficient, responsible. We are getting things done. We are clearing up lists. We are responding quickly. There's visible movement. Internally, however, something more subtle is happening. When pressure builds, an internal grounding in presence of mind becomes less accessible. This movement of being busy with actions can reduce the sensation of vulnerability. Action creates structure. Structure creates temporary stability. The more we do, the less time there is to feel uncertainty underneath. And because completion brings a brief sense of relief, our nervous system registers that relief as safety. The list gets shorter, the task is marked as complete, and for a moment that pressure feels a little quieter. And what we need to note here is this. What we are losing quietly is direction. When doing becomes the primary response, we may move far without checking if you're moving towards what actually matters. We may prioritize what is urgent over what is aligned. We may fill our days without noticing that our internal orientation has not caught up with our pace, and our reflective question becomes, am I increasing activity with an aligned, collaborative mind, or as a response to alleviate pressure? Now, let us look at another pattern that can show up in some of us, where this can show up in our thoughts. We begin thinking more, analyzing more, replaying conversations, projecting outcomes, running through scenarios in our mind as though one of them will reveal the right answer. To the outside world, nothing may look different. We may appear calm, still, measured, and yet internally, our mind is moving quickly, swirling 1,000 thoughts, all going in many different directions. What is happening here is when pressure builds and internal grounding becomes less accessible, our cognition can move into overdrive. Thinking feels productive, it feels responsible, it feels like we are working towards clarity, and in many ways, thinking is an intelligent response. Our mind is trying to reduce uncertainty. It is searching for that missing variable that will restore steadiness. And we also know this. There's a subtle shift that can happen here. Thinking can begin to lean towards worry. Analysis can circle and move towards paralysis. And all of this can turn into rumination. Instead of supporting alignment, our thoughts can begin attempting to eliminate discomfort of pressure. We tell ourselves that we can just think this through a little bit more and we'll find the solution that eases the pressure. And because thinking gives the sensation of activity, our nervous system registers that activity as effort towards safety. However, if we do not catch ourselves, what can quietly slip here is discernment. When thinking becomes the primary response for pressure, we may begin mistaking mental movement for clarity. We may feel busy in our minds and still remain uncertain. We may generate options without feeling anchored in any one of them. We are processing and thinking a lot and still feeling lost with no direction. Our reflective question then becomes, is my thinking bringing me clarity, or is it keeping me busy enough to avoid the discomfort of not yet knowing? And yet another way our pace can increase under pressure is one where it can feel deceptively responsible and capable. Some of us may notice that when pressure builds, we begin deciding more quickly. We shorten the time between question and answer. We move towards resolution. We choose, we conclude, we close loops. This is one where the outside world could even commend you for being so decisive, confident, clear. And sometimes it is. There are moments where clarity is available and action is appropriate. But under sustained pressure, something slightly different can start to happen. When internal grounding becomes less accessible, ambiguity starts to feel uncomfortable. The longer a decision remains open, the more internal tension we may feel. And so, choosing quickly brings relief. Resolution creates structure, structure reduces uncertainty, and our nervous system registers that as a reduction that leads to safety. Notice, however, in all of this, there is no evaluation if the decision made was the most appropriate one for the scenario. And this is the subtle shift to watch for. We may begin deciding not from alignment, but from the desire to end the discomfort. The priority becomes closure rather than clarity. And we might say yes simply to move forward. We might say no without the due diligence the situation requires. We might commit before fully checking whether the decision reflects what matters most. And because the decision is made, the internal noise quiets and the pressure eases for at least a moment. And what can quietly slip up here is discernment. When we compress decision making under pressure, we may reduce our tolerance for nuance. We may trade reflection for relief. We may feel a sense of progress without actually confirming direction. And our reflective question becomes, am I deciding because I'm clear or because I'm uncomfortable with not yet having an answer? Another way our pace can increase under pressure is not through action, it's not through thinking, and it's not through deciding. It's through how quickly we move past what we feel. Some of us may recognize this pattern in how we contain emotion. We feel something rise, it could be frustration, disappointment, uncertainty, and almost immediately we compress it. We tell ourselves, this is not the time. We move on, we continue functioning. To the outside world, this can look composed, regulated, professional, even strong, and sometimes it is appropriate to contain emotion in the given moment. But under sustained pressure, something slightly different can begin to happen. When our internal grounding becomes less accessible, emotion can feel like friction. It can feel like something that will slow us down, complicate the situation, or make things harder for us to navigate. And so we move quickly to bottle it. The faster we contain what we feel, the less vulnerable we appear, and our nervous system registers this containment as efficiency. We're not escalating, we're not unraveling, we're staying intact. Here too, though, there's a subtle shift. When we move past what we feel too quickly, we lose the information embedded in it. Emotion carries signal about alignment, about boundaries, about what matters. When suppression becomes speed, those signals are muted. We may continue to move forward, we may appear steady, and yet internally, all of the information our emotional signals have given us is ignored and unprocessed. And over time, this can create distance, not just from others, but from our own self. What can quietly slip here is access to our inner truth. When emotion is consistently suppressed under pressure, clarity may appear intact even while alignment is gone. And our reflective question becomes, am I containing what I feel because it is aligned to do so in this moment? Or because dealing with it is an inconvenience when I'm trying to move past discomfort so quickly? And now let us look at another way increased pace can show up under pressure. And this one often goes unnoticed because it looks efficient. Some of us recognize this pattern in us and how we relate to others when pressure builds. We shorten conversations, we reduce check-ins, we keep interactions functional and to the bare minimum. We tell ourselves we're simply focused and no time for the soft space of relationship and connection building. When inner grounding becomes less accessible, relational depth can begin to feel like something we do not have the capacity to hold. Nuance takes time. Listening takes energy. Emotional presence requires internal steadiness. When pressure is high and our internal collaboration is not fully accessible, reducing relational depth can feel like a way to conserve capacity. We may find ourselves speaking more in conclusions than in curiosity, offering direction instead of dialogue, moving forward resolution rather than exploration. And because outcomes are still being achieved, that shift may not be obvious at first, because what can quietly slip here is connection. When pace begins to override presence in our relationship, we may maintain productivity while losing relational alignment. Others may feel responded to, but not fully heard or valued. What this is really about is capacity narrowing. And our reflective question becomes, where am I under pressure? Do I still engage with depth or pull away to conserve energy by keeping connections at the surface level? And there's one more way. Increased pace can show up under pressure, and this one can feel like strength. Some of us respond to pressure by taking on more, not just tasks, but responsibility. We increase our capacity. We step forward. We carry, we absorb, we tell ourselves we are simply rising to the occasion. And in many cases, we are capable of doing exactly that. But under sustained pressure, something more subtle can start to happen. When inner grounding becomes less accessible, pressure can start to feel like a test of identity, not just something to navigate, but something to prove ourselves against. We may find ourselves thinking, I can handle this, I have handled worse, I will not let this break me. And so our pace can increase, fueled by our determination. We take on what we do not need to. We refuse to delegate. We push past fatigue. We override signals from our body. We keep showing up as strong, even when strength has shifted to strain. And because others may rely on us or even admire us, this pattern can feel justified. However, what can quietly slip here is self-trust. When proving replaces presence, we may begin operating from pressure instead of clarity. We may mistake endurance for alignment. We may equate capacity with worth. And yes, over time, the cost accumulates silently. And when the threshold of being able to hold it together has gone past breached, it could show up as a breakdown or a burnout where you can no longer go on. So here, a reflective question becomes, when pressure intensifies, am I responding with clarity or am I responding to prove myself? When we step back and look at all of these patterns together, what becomes clear is that none of them are random. Whether we speed up through thinking, doing, deciding, containing emotion, or proving our strength, the common thread is not the behavior itself. It is what that behavior is trying to accomplish. In every case, our nervous system is attempting to reduce internal discomfort that pressure brings. Pressure creates instability. Instability creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates tension. And this is an unsafe space for our mind, body, and nervous system. And speed is, in one form or another, becomes an attempt to restore stability and safety. Speed gives the sensation of movement. Movement gives the sensation of progression. Progress gives the sensation of control, and control, even briefly, feels like safety. And the important distinction for us to recognize is that speed is not what creates the loss of alignment. When internal collaboration between cognition, emotion, consciousness, and our nervous system becomes less accessible, our nervous system defaults to a compensatory or a habitual pattern that gives us that sense of stability. Our patterns that lead into speed show up because alignment has already narrowed or reduced. It reduces tension in the short term. It does not, however, restore alignment or allow you to operate with presence of mind under sustained pressure. It simply allows you to feel like you're coping in the moment. And now, as we move to the closing of this episode, what matters most is not whether speed shows up for us under pressure. It will. It can, in whatever pattern that is habitual to us. What matters most is how quickly we recognize that we are operating in a default pattern and not what is the best for the current scenario. Because the moment we become aware and recognize that our pace is increasing in our actions, our thinking, our decisions, our emotional containment, our relationships, or simply our need to prove, that noticing that moment, if we decided to be, is the beginning of our return back to presence of mind. When we allow our default pattern to run without awareness, without checks, it can carry us further from alignment before we even realize it. But when we catch it early, even in small ways, we start to create that space to recalibrate, not by judging ourselves, simply by asking ourselves, am I moving towards clarity or compensating for its absence? And the more often we ask that question in real time, the more we train our nervous system to pause before defaulting. And over time, that pause becomes shorter. Recognition becomes quicker. Alignment becomes more accessible, even under pressure. And this is how steadiness strengthens, simply by restoring our aligned direction sooner. Now, before we move forward, I want to invite us to sit with a few reflections. Which pattern tends to show up first for us when pressure builds? How quickly do we notice it in real time? And what small steps can we begin to take to recognize it sooner? And as you sit with those reflections, please do consider sharing your insights with all of us so we can all collectively resonate and grow. You can also connect with me directly through the platforms you're listening. And in our next episode, we will widen this further and explore the many ways our presence of mind can weaken when we are facing pressure. Thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Gayatri. Until next time, let us continue deepening our awareness so we can recognize our internal shifts sooner, so we can move through life in alignment with ourself.